The world was broken. From the high atmosphere, the planet Cylon Prime looked like a child's toy that had been smashed by a giant. Great black scars cut across its green and blue surface. Here and there, the tiny flashes of light showed where the fighting was still happening. It was a war between two peoples. The Tarkellan Empire, a race of tall reptilian soldiers, was trying to take this world from the Cylenians, the gentle, plant-like people who had lived there for thousands of years. On the ground, in the middle of this destruction, there was a small circle of peace. It was a field hospital. A shimmering blue energy dome covered it like a bubble. Inside that bubble, the sounds of war were a dull, faraway thunder. The air here smelled of cleaning chemicals and medicine, not smoke and blood. This was the place where Dr. Lee Jun worked. He was a human man, not a soldier. His hands were made for holding medical tools, not weapons. He had come from Earth as a volunteer with the Interstellar Medical Corps. His job was simple, to help anyone who was hurt. It did not matter to him if they were a Selenian child or a Tarkellan soldier. Pain was pain, and he was there to stop it. Right now, those skilled hands were deep inside the chest of a young Tarkellan soldier. The soldier's green scales were dull and covered in his own dark blood. A piece of shrapnel had torn through his body. Jun's movements were calm and precise. His focus was absolute. Around him, other human and Cylenian nurses moved quietly, their faces tired but determined. Nurse Kim Yuna stood beside him, wiping sweat from his brow. "His vital signs are falling, doctor," she said, her voice soft with worry. Jun did not look up. "More blood, and increase the oxygen flow." His voice was a low, steady hum, a sound of stability in the chaos. He believed in his oath, the promise he made to do no harm. In this place of death, he was a servant of life. Suddenly, the calm was shattered. The main entrance to the hospital tent was ripped open. 3 Tarkellan soldiers stood there, their heavy boots muddying the clean floor. They were tall, with sharp features and cold black eyes. Their leader was a soldier named Kalen. He carried himself with the stiff pride of his people, a race obsessed with honor and battle. Kalen's eyes scanned the room, looking over the wounded Cylenians with clear disgust. "This facility is now under Tarkellan command," he announced, his voice a harsh, grating sound. Dr. Jun slowly pulled his hands from the patient, allowing a nurse to take over. He raised his gloved hands, palms out, to show he was not a threat. "This is a neutral medical zone," he said, his tone respectful but firm. "It is protected by galactic law. Everyone here is under our care. You are welcome to leave your wounded, but you cannot command this place." Kalen took a step forward, his plasma rifle held ready. A Cylenian insurgent was seen running here. "He is a threat. You will hand him over." "There are no insurgents here," Jun replied calmly. "There are only patients. Please lower your weapon. You are disturbing my work." One of the other soldiers gestured with his rifle toward the back of the tent, where a group of Selenian families huddled together, their large, leaf-like ears trembling with fear. Among them was a small child no taller than Jun's knee. The child was frightened by the loud voices and the scary soldiers. With a small cry, he darted from his hiding spot, trying to run to his mother on the other side of the tent. Kalen reacted instantly. He saw movement. He saw a potential threat. In his mind, honor demanded action against any possible enemy. He swung his rifle towards the small running figure. Everything seemed to slow down. Jun saw the rifle barrel moving. He saw the terrified look on the child's face. He did not think. There was no time for thought. There was only instinct, an instinct built on a lifetime of protecting, not harming. He moved, in one fluid motion. Dr. Lee Jun placed his own body between the Tarkellan soldier and the Selenian child. A searing bolt of green plasma erupted from the rifle, struck Jun square in the chest. The force of the blast lifted him off his feet and threw him backward. He crashed onto a metal operating table, sending surgical tools clattering to the floor. The smell of burnt flesh and fabric filled the air. For a moment, there was a perfect, horrible silence. Then the screaming started. Nurse Kim Yuna was the first to reach him. Her eyes were wide with shock and horror. "Jun!" she cried out, her professional calm completely gone. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands pressing down on the smoldering hole in his white medic's uniform. The fabric was gone, and the skin and flesh beneath were a blackened, ruined mess. Kalen stood frozen, his rifle still pointed at the spot where Jun had been standing. He had not expected this. He had expected a fight or surrender. He had not expected a human to sacrifice himself for a Silenian child. The Tarkellan code of honor was about defeating worthy opponents in battle. This felt wrong. A flicker of shame, cold and unfamiliar, stirred in his stomach. The other nurses and doctors rushed to June's side, pushing the stunned Tarkellans aside. They worked frantically, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to find a pulse. Yuna looked up from June's still body, her face pale. She looked directly at Kalen, her eyes filled with a fury he did not understand. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "He was here to save your people too." She turned to the communications officer, a young man who was staring in stunned silence. "Send the signal," she ordered, her voice now hard as steel. "Code Black, human healer down. Tarkellan aggression. I repeat, Code Black." The officer fumbled with his equipment. A moment later, a powerful automated signal burst from the hospital's transmitter. It was a simple, terrible message. It shot up through the atmosphere and into the cold, empty space beyond. It was a call for help, but also a declaration. A line had been crossed. Back inside the tent, the medical team worked on June. His biosign monitor, a machine that showed the electrical activity of his heart, showed a flat, steady line. A single long beep filled the air. It was the sound of a life ending. Nurse Yuna looked at the flat line on the screen, then back at June's face. It was peaceful, as if he were simply sleeping. She bowed her head, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The small Silenian child, now safe in his mother's arms, stared at the doctor who had saved him, his large eyes full of a confusion too deep for words. Kalen finally lowered his rifle. The arrogance was gone from his posture. He looked at the chaos he had caused. He looked at the dead human. He had followed his orders. He had acted with honor. So why did he feel like he had just lost something far more important than a battle? He turned and walked out of the hospital, his two soldiers following silently behind him. They left behind a quiet filled with grief and the beginning of a terrible gathering storm. The message was sent. There was no taking it back. The silence on the bridge of the Earth Dreadnought Unyielding Resolve was a physical thing. It was not an empty silence, but a heavy, waiting quiet. Like the moment between a lightning flash and the roll of thunder, the only sounds were the soft, steady beeps from control panels and the faint whisper of the air recyclers. The lights were low, casting a soft glow on the polished metal and dark screens. Captain Park Ji-min sat in her command chair in the center of the bridge. Her hands rested on the armrests, perfectly still. She was reviewing a long, boring report about supply logistics. It listed things like water recycling efficiency and food stock levels. Her dark eyes moved calmly across the data screen on her wrist. It was routine, peaceful work. The Unyielding Resolve was orbiting a quiet, neutral star system, far from any conflict. Its immense power was dormant, its weapons cold and silent. Jimin was a woman who valued calm and order. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple, neat style. Her uniform was perfectly pressed. She had earned her command not through loud bravery, but through quiet, smart decisions. She understood the weight of the ship she commanded. The Unyielding Resolve was not just a warship. It was a statement. It was one of the largest vessels ever built by humanity, a city of metal and firepower that could, by itself, challenge a small fleet. To use its power was a last resort, a final answer to a question that should never have been asked. A soft chime sounded. It was not an alarm, just a standard notification. Jimin glanced at the main communication screen. A small flashing symbol indicated an incoming priority message. It was marked with the code of the Interstellar Medical Corps. "Lieutenant Kang," Jimin said, her voice even. "Put the IMC message on screen too. Let's see what they need." The young communications officer, Lieutenant Kang Day, nodded. "Aye, Captain. It's a data packet from Silent Prime, high encryption Silent Prime." Jimin knew the name. It was a war zone. A messy, brutal conflict between the Tarkellans and the natives. The IMC had a team there. She felt a small pang of concern for them. It was a dangerous place for healers. The screen flickered to life. For a moment, it showed only text. Source: IMC Field Hospital 7. Silent Prime Priority. Urgent. Code Black message begins then. A video feed appeared. It was shaky, filmed on a handheld device. The image showed the inside of a medical tent. The view was from the ground, as if the person filming had dropped the camera. The picture jumped and spun. There were blurred images of people running. the flash of green Tarkellan armor and the sound of a single, loud energy blast. A voice, a woman's voice, tight with panic, gasped 2 words, "Human healer down." The screen went to static for a second, then showed a final, frozen image. It was a close-up of a man's face. He was lying on his back. His eyes were closed. There was a terrible, smoldering wound on his chest. His face was pale and still. Jimin recognized him immediately from the mission briefings. Dr. Lee Jun, one of their best trauma surgeons, a man who had chosen to go into hell to save lives. Below the image, a line of data scrolled. Subject Dr. Lee Jun, IMCID 774 Gamma. Status, deceased location, Cylon Prime cause of termination, energy weapon trauma, hostile action. The word deceased glowed a dull, final red on the screen. The heavy silence on the bridge shattered. It was replaced by a new, colder silence. The air itself seemed to grow still. Every officer on the bridge had stopped what they were doing. They were all looking at the screen. They were all looking at the face of the dead doctor. Captain Park Jimin did not move. She did not gasp or cry out. She simply stared at the screen. Her face, usually so calm and controlled, became like stone. The only sign of the storm inside her was a single, small muscle twitching near her jaw. She took a slow, deep breath. Her mind, which a moment before had been thinking about water recycling, was now a map of strategy and consequence. She saw it all clearly. A protected healer. A neutral zone. A blatant, unprovoked attack. It was not just a murder. It was an insult. A challenge. It was the breaking of the one rule that kept the darkness of war from consuming everything. "Lieutenant Kang," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "Confirm the source. Authenticate the biosign. I want absolute certainty." Day's fingers flew across his console. "Retransmitting authentication request to IMC beacon now, Captain." A moment passed. Then another. The only sound was the hum of the ship. "Authentication confirmed, Captain. The message is genuine. The biosignature for Dr. Lee Jun has terminated. The data is correct." Jimin gave a single sharp nod. She stood up from her chair. She was not a tall woman, but in that moment she seemed to fill the entire bridge with her presence. Her eyes swept over her crew. She saw the shock on their faces, and beneath it a growing anger. She opened a ship-wide communication channel. Her voice, still quiet, now carried a weight that could crush planets. "This is Captain Park," she began. Every person on the ship, from the engine room to the mess hall, could hear her. "A few moments ago we received a code black signal from Cylon Prime." She paused, letting the words sink in. Every human in space knew what a code black meant. It was the worst news possible. The Tarkellan Empire has violated the galactic conventions of war. They entered a protected medical facility. They fired on an unarmed doctor. Dr. Lee Jun, a man who had dedicated his life to saving others, including Tarkellan soldiers, is dead. She let the silence hang for a moment. The anger on the faces of her crew was now clear and sharp. "They have broken the only rule that matters," Jimin continued, her voice hardening. "They have shown us that they do not understand mercy. They do not understand honor. They only understand force." She turned from the crew and looked toward the front of the bridge, where the main viewer showed the peaceful stars. "So, we will show them force." She turned to her helmsman, a serious woman named Shin Hye-jin. "Lieutenant Shin, plot an immediate course for the Cylon Prime system. Maximum burn. I want us there yesterday." Hye-jin's hands were already moving. "Course plotted and laid in, Captain. Engaging primary engines now." A deep, powerful thrum began to vibrate through the deck plates. It was a feeling that went through your bones. It was the sound of the unyielding resolve waking up. Jimin's gaze shifted to her chief engineer on the comm screen from main engineering. "Chief Choi, activate the war core. Take us to full combat readiness. I want all systems green and all weapons hot when we arrive." In the bowels of the ship, Chief Engineer Choi Soo-min heard the order. She was standing in a control room surrounded by screens showing power levels and engine stress. She was a practical woman, her hands often smudged with grease. She nodded, her face all business. "Aye, Captain. Activating war core, bringing primary reactors online. We will be ready." All across the massive ship, lights that had been dark for months suddenly glowed to life. Sections of the ship that were usually quiet were now filled with the sounds of crews running to their stations. Huge banks of capacitors began to charge, storing immense energy. The long, cold barrels of railguns and plasma cannons were powered up, their targeting systems searching for enemies in the empty space around them. On the bridge, Captain Park Ji-min sat back down in her command chair. The peaceful report on supply logistics was forgotten on her data screen. In its place was a live tactical display of the ship's systems, all glowing green, all ready for war. She stared at the main viewer, at the stars that were now beginning to streak past as the ship leaped into faster-than-light travel. The journey would not take long. The unyielding resolve was built for this. She thought of Dr. Lee Jun, a man she had never met. She thought of his hands trained for healing, not hurting. She thought of the Tarkellan soldier who had pulled the trigger. And she knew with a cold certainty that the Tarkellans had no idea what was coming for them. They had killed one gentle, peaceful human. In return, they would face the single most powerful warship humanity had ever built. They had asked for a lesson in consequences. The unyielding resolve was on its way to teach it. The journey through the void was not a long one. For the crew of the unyielding resolve, it felt like a single held breath. The ship tore through the fabric of space, a silent arrow aimed at a single bloody planet. Inside, the atmosphere was tense and quiet. Crew members spoke in low voices. They checked and rechecked their systems. There was no fear, only a cold, focused readiness. Captain Park Ji-min sat in her command chair. She did not move much. Her eyes were fixed on the countdown timer to their arrival. She thought about the report. She thought about the flat line on the biosign monitor. She thought about the principle that had been broken. This was not about revenge. It was about making a statement so clear that no one in the galaxy would ever make the same mistake again. The timer reached 0, space twisted, and reality snapped back into place. The stars on the main viewer stopped their long streaks and became steady points of light. And there, hanging in the blackness, was Cylon Prime. The world was a mottled ball of green and blue, scarred by the ugly gray and black of war. The effect of the Dreadnought's arrival was immediate. Its massive size distorted local space. The powerful energy of its war core created ripples that washed over the entire system. On the planet below, every sensor array, every communication dish, every power grid experienced a sudden, terrifying surge. In the main command bunker of the Tarkellan forces, the lighting flickered. Alarms began to blare, different from the ones for incoming missiles or ground assaults. This was a Priority 1 alert, a sound reserved for existential threats. The Tarkellan High Commander, a grizzled veteran named Vorlak, spun away from his tactical map. "Report," he barked. A young officer stared at his screen, his scales pale with confusion. "Sir." A massive gravitational signature just appeared at the edge of the system. It's a ship. A single ship. One ship?" Vorlak snarled. "Then why are the alarms sounding?" "Identify it." The officer's voice trembled. "The computer identifies it as an Earth-class dreadnought. The unyielding resolve." The name meant nothing to Vorlak. The Tarkellans had heard stories of human warships, of course. But they were a proud warrior race. They believed their own fleets with their many agile and powerful cruisers were superior. A single ship, no matter how big, was just one target. On the bridge of the unyielding resolve, Lieutenant Kang Day looked up from his panel. "Captain, we are being scanned by Tarkellan defense grids. Their fleet is mobilizing. They are hailing us." Ji-min gave a small, cold smile. "Put me through to their high command." "All channels." She stood up and smoothed her uniform. On the main viewer, the image of Cylon Prime was replaced by the face of High Commander Vorlak. He looked angry and impatient. "Unidentified human vessel," Vorlak began, his voice a low growl. "You have entered a Tarkellan-controlled war zone without permission. Identify your purpose or be considered hostile." Captain Park Ji-min looked at him. Her face was calm, her eyes like dark ice. "High Commander! I am Captain Park Ji-min of the Earth Dreadnought Unyielding Resolve. We are not unidentified, and we are very aware that this is a war zone." Vorlak blinked. Her calmness was more unsettling than shouting. "State your business, Captain." "You are accused of the unlawful killing of a human interstellar medical corps operative," she said, her voice flat and precise. "The healer, Dr. Lee Jun. He was murdered under the symbol of the medical cross in a protected neutral zone." Vorlak waved a clawed hand dismissively. "There was an incident. A soldier reacted to a perceived threat. These things happen in war. It is regrettable." "Regrettable?" Jimin repeated the word slowly as if tasting something sour. You call the murder of a man who was saving the lives of your own soldiers regrettable? It was a single human, Vorlak said, his arrogance returning. A non-combatant. It is a minor matter. There was a deadly silence on the bridge of the Dreadnought. Every crew member heard the words. A single human. A minor matter. Captain Park's expression did not change, but her voice dropped, becoming even quieter and more dangerous. It is not a minor matter. You have 1 standard hour. Vorlak leaned forward, his snout close to the screen. 1 hour for what? To surrender the individual, Soldier Kalen, who fired the shot. And to surrender the commanding officer, who created the conditions that allowed this to happen. You will turn them over to human jurisdiction for trial. For a moment, Vorlak was speechless. Then a harsh, grating laugh escaped his throat. You are insane? You would make such a demand? You with your 1 ship against the might of the Tarkellan fleet? We will not surrender our warriors to you. Then you declare war, Jimin said simply. War? Vorlak scoffed. You would go to war for 1 man? This was the question that had hung in the air since the code black signal was sent. Jimin looked directly into the screen, her gaze seeming to pass through the void and pin Vorlak to his seat. We do not go to war for a man, she said, and every syllable was clear and sharp. We go to war for the principle he represented. For the idea that there are lines you do not cross, that a healer is sacred, that mercy has meaning. You have shown you do not understand this. So we will teach you. Your hour begins now. The screen went dark, returning to the view of the planet and the Tarkellan fleet, which was now swarming like angry insects between them and the world. On the planet, in his bunker, Vorlak stared at the blank screen. The human's words echoed in his mind. A principle? It made no sense. War was about territory, resources, victory. What was a principle? He felt a flicker of unease, but he crushed it. They were weak, these humans. Sentimental. He turned to his officers. Bring the fleet to full battle readiness. Shield the command bunker. That ship is a big target. We will crush it with numbers. Back on the unyielding resolve, Chief Engineer Choi Soo-min's voice came over the comms. Captain, their planetary shield is activating. It's a strong, centralized system. Their fleet is moving into a defensive formation around the generator's location. Jimin sat back in her chair. Thank you, Chief. All stations hold position. Weapon systems remain on standby. Let the clock run. The bridge was silent again. The crew watched the timer count down from 1 hour. They watched the Tarkellan fleet move, their ships positioning to protect their most vital asset. They were preparing for a battle. They were preparing to fight an enemy they thought they understood. They did not understand that the unyielding resolve was not just a ship. It was a promise that if you broke the rules of decency, you would face a consequence so absolute it would echo through the stars. The Tarkellans were counting the ships. The humans were counting the seconds until they had to prove that promise was real. The single hour passed. The clock on the bridge of the unyielding resolve reached 0. A soft chime sounded, a polite and terrible noise in the quiet. Captain Park Ji-min did not need to give the order. Her crew had been waiting. They had watched the Tarkellan fleet move into its defensive positions. They had seen the powerful energy of the planetary shield flare to life, a shimmering blue dome covering the main command center and the generator that powered it. The Tarkellans had not surrendered. They had chosen war. Lieutenant Shin, Jimin said, her voice calm. Move us to engagement range. Standard approach. Aye, Captain, Heejin replied. Her hands moved on her console. The massive dreadnought, which had been hanging motionless in space, began to move forward. It did not rush. It advanced with a slow, terrifying grace like a predator that knows its prey cannot escape. On the Tarkellan command ship, High Commander Vorlak watched the human vessel approach. He felt a surge of confidence. It was so slow. His own ships were fast and agile. They would swarm it. They would hit it from all sides. All units, he commanded. Attack pattern Delta. Focus fire on its engines. Disable it! A wave of Tarkellan fighters and cruisers surged forward. They were like a cloud of gnats moving towards a giant. They fired a volley of plasma missiles, a brilliant, glowing net of death speeding towards the dreadnought. On the bridge of the unyielding resolve, a young tactical officer spoke up. Captain, incoming missile salvo. 50+ contacts, Jimin nodded. Point defense systems engage. Neutralize them. All across the hull of the Dreadnought, small, rapid-fire turrets sprang to life. They did not fire large explosive shells. They fired thousands of small, hypervelocity projectiles. It looked like a storm of metal dust spreading out from the ship. The incoming plasma missiles began to explode harmlessly, one by one, far short of their target. They lit up the darkness with brief, silent flowers of fire. Not a single one got through. Vorlak stared in disbelief. How? Their targeting systems? They can't be that accurate. Send in the cruisers. Get closer. The larger Tarkellan warships moved in. They fired their heavy plasma cannons. Thick beams of green energy lanced across the void, striking the shields of the Dreadnought. The shields glowed brightly where they were hit, but they held firm. The ship did not even shudder. Chief Engineer Choi Soo-min watched her power readouts. Shields are holding at 98%. Their weapons are ineffective against our dispersion field. Captain Jimin watched the tactical display. The Tarkellan ships were now within range of her secondary weapons. Tactical, disable the lead cruisers. Target their engines and primary weapons. Avoid their life support. Aye, Captain. From the sides of the unyielding Resolve, a series of smaller, bright blue beams shot out. They were not meant to destroy. They were precise like a surgeon's laser. They struck the Tarkellan cruisers not in their centers but in specific vital spots. On one ship, its main engine array exploded silently, and the ship began to drift. On another, its primary plasma cannon was sliced cleanly in half, rendering it useless. The human ship was not trying to kill them. It was disarming them, making them helpless. It was a humiliation. Vorlak watched his fleet being taken apart piece by piece. His confidence turned to cold, hard fear. This was not a battle. This was a demonstration. His ships were not being defeated. They were being ignored. The human dreadnought continued its slow, unstoppable advance towards the planet, towards his bunker. Down on the planet's surface, the world had gone mad. The sky, usually a pale green, was now lit with the flashes of the battle happening in orbit. People in the field hospital huddled together, listening to the distant booms that echoed through the atmosphere. In the recovery tent, a miracle was happening. A soft groan escaped Dr. Lee Jun's lips. Nurse Kim Yuna, who was checking on another patient, spun around. She rushed to his side. His eyes were fluttering open. Jun? She whispered, her voice trembling. Can you hear me? He blinked, his vision blurry. There was a deep throbbing pain in his chest. He tried to speak, but only a dry cough came out. Yuna held a cup of water to his lips. What? What happened? He finally managed to say, his voice a rough whisper. The Tarkellan. He shot you, Yuna said, her eyes filling with tears of relief and shock. We thought we lost you. Your biosign monitor. It flatlined. Jun looked down at the heavy bandages on his chest. He remembered the flash of green. The impact. The child. The boy? He asked. He is safe. You saved him. Yuna held his hand tightly. But Jun? Something else has happened. After you fell, we sent the code black. Jun's mind, still foggy with pain and drugs, tried to understand. A code black. A call for help. But the feeling in the air was not about help. It was about fear and awe. The humans, Yuna said, her voice full of wonder. They heard the call. They sent a ship. A ship? Jun asked weakly. Not just a ship, she said, pointing a trembling finger towards the ceiling, towards the sky. They sent a dreadnought. For you. They are here. They are in orbit, fighting the entire Tarkellan fleet because of what they did to you. Dr. Lee Jun stared at her, unable to process the words. A dreadnought? For him? The idea was too huge, too terrifying. He was just a doctor. He had chosen a life of peace. And now, a war was being fought in his name. A wave of nausea washed over him that had nothing to do with his wound. Back in orbit, the unyielding Resolve had cleared the remaining Tarkellan ships. They floated around it, disabled and powerless. The dreadnought now hung directly over the planet's main continent, its shadow a promise of doom. Their planetary shield is still at full strength, Captain, reported the tactical officer. The generator is located directly under their main command bunker. It is heavily armored. Chief Choi's voice came over the comms. Captain, I've analyzed their shield grid. It's powerful, but it has a weakness. The entire system is fed by a single primary power node. It's the heart of the system. A concentrated strike on that node would overload and collapse the entire shield. On the main viewer, a targeting reticule appeared over a location on the planet's surface. It was a heavily fortified compound, protected by the shimmering blue dome. One shot from the primary mass driver would be sufficient, Chief Choi added. The mass driver was the unyielding Resolve's main weapon. It was a colossal cannon that fired a projectile at a fraction of the speed of light. A single shot could crack a continent. A single shot could turn that bunker and everyone in it into a smoking crater. Captain Jimin looked at the targeting display. The Tarkellan High Commander was down there. The soldier who fired the shot was likely down there. They were completely at her mercy. One order, one word, and it would be over. The lesson would be written in fire and blood for the entire galaxy to see. The bridge was silent, waiting for that word. The power for the mass driver hummed through the ship, a low, hungry sound. Down below in the bunker, Forlax stared at the ceiling as if he could see the monstrous ship through the rock and metal. His fleet was gone. His shield was the only thing left. And he knew, with a sickening certainty, that it would not be enough. He had thought the humans were weak. He had been wrong. They were not weak. They were simply patient, and their patience had run out. He waited for the end. The hum of the mass driver's charging sequence was the loudest sound on the bridge. It was a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated in the bones of every crew member. On the main viewer, the targeting reticule glowed a steady, angry red over the Tarkellan command bunker. The planet's shield shimmered below, a fragile-looking blue bubble against the immense power of the Dreadnought. Captain Park Jimin's finger hovered over the fire command on her screen. A single touch. That was all it would take. It would be justice. It would be vengeance. It would be a message that no one would ever forget. The Tarkellans had broken the rule, and this was the consequence. The galaxy would learn what it meant to harm a human healer. Her tactical officer looked at her, his face tense. Mass driver is at 100%, Captain. We have a solid target lock. The shield will not withstand the impact. Jimin took a slow breath. She saw the faces of her crew waiting. She saw the face of Dr. Lee Jun in her mind. Then a different thought came to her. What would he want? A man who dedicated his life to saving others. Would he want this? A slaughter? Just as she was about to speak, a new voice cut through the tense silence of the bridge. It was Lieutenant Kang Day at the communications station. Captain, incoming transmission from the planet's surface. It's on the IMC medical frequency. It's a visual feed. Jimin's head snapped around. Put it on screen. The image of the target lock vanished. In its place, a shaky, poor-quality video appeared. It was from inside the field hospital. The camera was low, as if being held by someone who was kneeling. The picture focused, and a face came into view. It was Dr. Lee Jun. He was pale and lying on a cot. A thick bandage was wrapped around his chest. His eyes were heavy with pain and drugs, but they were open. He was alive. A collective sharp gasp echoed on the bridge. Everyone stared, unable to believe what they were seeing. Jun's voice was weak, a dry whisper that crackled over the speakers. Captain Park, this is Dr. Lee Jun, can you hear me? Captain Park Jimin felt the world tilt under her feet. She leaned forward, her hand gripping the armrest of her chair. Doctor, we read you. We were told you were killed. A faint, pained smile touched Jun's lips. The monitor. It was broken. The blast. It was deflected. I am alive. He took a ragged breath. I have been told what is happening. What you are here to do. Please. You must stop. You must stand down. On the planet, Nurse Kim Yuna held the communicator for Jun, her hands shaking. Around them, the other medical staff watched, their faces a mixture of hope and fear. On the bridge of the Dreadnought, the crew was frozen. They looked from the screen showing the alive, pleading doctor to their captain, who held the power to erase a city from existence. Jimin's mind raced. All the planning, all the resolve, the entire terrifying journey. It had been built on a foundation of loss and a need for justice. Now that foundation was gone. The man they had come to avenge was asking them for mercy. Doctor, Jimin said, her voice softer than it had been in days. They shot you. They violated every law of decency. They need to understand the cost. They do understand, June whispered, his voice gaining a little strength. I have seen their faces. The soldier who shot me. I saw his shame. They are watching your ship in their sky. They are afraid. You have shown them your strength. He coughed, wincing in pain. Now, show them our mercy. Show them what my life is truly worth. It is not worth the thousands of lives in that bunker. It is not worth becoming the monsters they believe we are. Please, Captain. He was not asking for himself. He was asking for the souls of his crew. He was asking for the principle to be upheld in a better way. Captain Park Jimin looked away from the screen. She looked at the faces of her crew. She saw the confusion, but she also saw the relief. They were soldiers, but they were not murderers. They had been ready to deliver justice, but they did not crave a massacre. She turned to her tactical officer. Her voice was clear and calm, carrying across the silent bridge. Cease fire. Power down the mast driver. The order was given. The deep, hungry hum of the weapon faded away, replaced by the normal, quiet sounds of the ship. The red targeting reticule on the main viewer blinked out. The image of the planet returned, peaceful and whole. A wave of palpable relief washed over the bridge. Shoulders that had been tight with tension relaxed. Jimin turned back to the comms. Dr. June, we are standing down. She then switched channels. Open a channel to the Tarkellan command bunker. A moment later, the shocked and terrified face of High Commander Vorlak appeared on the screen. He had been waiting for death. He could not hide his fear. High Commander, Captain Park said, her voice once again cold and formal. You have seen our strength. You have seen that we could have destroyed you, and there was nothing you could have done to stop us. We did not do so because the man you tried to kill asked us to show you mercy. Remember this day. Remember that your continued existence is a gift from a human healer. The message has been sent. Do not make us repeat it. She cut the transmission without waiting for a reply. She then gave her final orders. Lieutenant Shin, set a course away from the planet. Take us out of the system. Slow and steady. The unyielding resolve, the god of war, turned its back on the world it had come to punish. It moved away, its weapons cooling, its purpose fulfilled in a way no one had expected. Down in the bunker, Vorlak sank into his chair, his body trembling. The human's words echoed in his mind. A gift from a human healer. He had thought them weak for their mercy. Now he understood that their mercy, coming from such unimaginable power, was more terrifying than their wrath could ever have been. It was a lesson in shame that would haunt him forever. And in the field hospital, Dr. Lee Jun let his head fall back onto the pillow, exhausted but at peace. Nurse Yuna squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. The Dreadnought left the Cylon Prime system, not as a conqueror but as a teacher. It had taught the Tarkellans and anyone else who was watching the true value humanity placed on a single, compassionate life. They had learned that to harm one of their healers was to invite a storm. But they had also learned that within that storm, there was a core of profound and unshakable mercy. The galaxy would not forget.